like you. Be strong to hold the powers of the sun. To dream, believe in strength. Now I'm the only one.
The studio lights of New York glimmered faintly through the thin autumn fog when Jungkook arrived for the Calvin Klein Holiday 2025 campaign shoot. The city, restless and electric, seemed to mirror the pulse beneath his calm exterior. 2 years had passed since his last major campaign, years filled with endless schedules, music, performances, and finally his completion of military service. Now, under the sharp lights of Calvin Klein's monochrome set, Jungkook was stepping back into the global spotlight, not as a boy band idol, but as a man fully in control of his presence. He walked into the studio wearing a simple black t-shirt, vintage denim jeans, and a shearling-lined leather jacket that carried an effortless 90s nostalgia. Around him, the team moved with quiet precision. Stylists fixed details on his belt, makeup artists softened the sheen of his skin, and the creative director whispered into the headset, "Ready in 5." The entire room held its breath as Jungkook stood in front of the mirror, his reflection half-shadowed by the harsh light. He ran a hand through his hair, and for a brief second, a smile, that soft, knowing smile that fans around the world recognized instantly, crossed his face. When the cameras began to roll, the transformation was immediate. Jungkook wasn't simply posing, he was performing. Every movement carried rhythm, the subtle arch of his back, the tilt of his jaw, the precise gaze that met the camera lens as if it were an old friend. The shoot began with the now iconic red corridor, its floor glistening like wet asphalt under city lights. He moved through it like a song, deliberate yet natural, a blend of confidence and quiet power. When the shutter clicked, it captured more than an image. It caught a pulse, a presence. Later, the set shifted into a simulated night street scene. A matte black motorcycle gleamed under the lights, and Jungkook swung a leg over it, gripping the handle as the camera circled him in a slow-motion take. His leather jacket opened just enough to reveal the Calvin Klein waistband beneath his jeans, the subtle play between control and freedom, strength and ease. The music in the background, the Chemical Brothers' block rockin' beats, set the rhythm, and Jungkook's body responded instinctively to its pulse. Every small movement, the flick of his hair, the tension in his shoulders, was art-directed yet entirely organic, embodying Calvin Klein's campaign theme, movement and performance. During breaks, the atmosphere changed. Away from the camera, Jungkook was quiet, almost introspective. Sitting by the wardrobe table, he sipped from a water bottle and spoke softly to a stylist beside him. "It feels so good to be back in denim," he said with a small laugh, echoing what he would later tell the press. That sentence carried weight, not only because it tied him back to the brand, but because it symbolized a return, a re-entry into a world that had missed him deeply during his military service. The next setup was more intimate, a luxury suite bathed in blue light, the window overlooking the New York skyline. Jungkook sat on the edge of the bed wearing a white cotton shirt and faded jeans. He turned his gaze toward the city, then to the camera, as if in conversation with both. The photographer, Mert Thalas, whispered directions barely audible. Jungkook moved in response, his expression thoughtful, reflective. There was a maturity in him, a quietness that came not from exhaustion but from depth. He wasn't just selling clothes, he was embodying a feeling, an emotion that transcended language. Outside the room, the Calvin Klein team watched the monitor in silence. What unfolded wasn't merely a photo shoot, it was storytelling through stillness. Jungkook's every frame told a chapter. A young man who had faced the noise of fame, the solitude of service, and now the rediscovery of self. The denim, with its connotations of rebellion, resilience, and authenticity, became an extension of his evolution. As the evening light shifted, the crew prepared for the final scene on a rooftop. The air was colder now. The city stretched endlessly below, a sea of gold and red lights. Jungkook stood near the edge, the wind brushing through his hair. The leather jacket rested on his shoulders again, and he held a black helmet loosely in his hand. When the camera began rolling, he turned his head toward the skyline. For a few seconds, he didn't move, he simply existed within the frame. That single take became one of the most powerful moments of the campaign. His eyes, reflecting the city lights, seemed to carry everything he had been through, the years of pressure, the sacrifices, the growth. Then, softly, he said, "Let's ride." The camera followed him as he placed the helmet down, took a slow step forward, and looked back once more. The shot faded into darkness. When the director called "cut," applause broke out across the rooftop. Jungkook smiled shyly and bowed to the crew. He thanked everyone, the stylists, the lighting team, the photographer. He shook hands, laughed softly, and stretched his shoulders. The workday was done, but the moment lingered. He walked to the edge again, peering down at the streets below. From up there, he could see the billboards, the taxis, the movement of a city that never sleeps, and soon, those same streets would be filled with his own image, plastered on the sides of buildings, glowing from LED screens across the world. When the behind-the-scenes video was released days later, fans could see it. The way Jungkook's laughter filled the studio, the way he playfully adjusted his jacket between takes, the small, unspoken moments that made the campaign feel human. He wasn't performing a character, he was showing himself. "It feels good to be back," he said again in the clip, and millions of fans echoed the sentiment online. The hashtags #Jungkook's Calvin Klein and #CK Holiday 2025 trended within hours. The global rollout of the campaign began on October 28, 2025. Giant billboards featuring Jungkook appeared in Times Square, Seoul, London, and Paris. The imagery was striking: red corridors, denim silhouettes, city lights against a black horizon. Calvin Klein described the collection as a celebration of individuality and movement, perfectly aligned with Jungkook's own artistry. For fans who had followed his journey since debut, this was more than fashion. It was a moment of pride, a visual testament to how far he had come. Behind the flash and the fame, there was still the quiet, genuine man from Busan, the one who once dreamed of singing, who trained endlessly to perfect his craft, who learned to face the world's gaze without losing himself. The campaign captured that duality: global icon and humble artist. It wasn't the extravagance that defined him, but the authenticity. Calvin Klein didn't just photograph Jungkook, they revealed him. Late that night, after the crew wrapped up and the lights were turned off one by one, Jungkook lingered in the empty studio. He stood in front of the mirror where the day had begun. The denim jacket hung loosely on his shoulders now, no longer part of a scene, just clothing on a man who had given everything to his art. He looked at his reflection and smiled quietly. It was a private moment, unseen by cameras, untouched by fame. A sigh left his lips, soft and steady. "We did well," he whispered in Korean, before walking out into the cool New York air. The campaign would soon take over the internet, headlines declaring his return to fashion dominance. But for Jungkook, it wasn't about domination, it was about expression, about movement, light, and truth. The essence of Calvin Klein was never about decoration, but honesty. And in that raw simplicity, Jungkook found something that mirrored himself. He had been the youngest member of BTS, the Golden Maknae, the performer who gave everything on stage. Now, in Calvin Klein's world of denim and light, he stood as a man defined not by the noise around him, but by the stillness within him. The Holiday 2025 campaign became a reflection, not only of Jungkook's aesthetic power, but of his journey toward maturity and artistic freedom. Somewhere in the streets below, someone would soon look up and see his face shining from a skyscraper billboard, unaware of the quiet hours behind that perfect shot. The laughter, the effort, the solitude, the reflection, all of it hidden behind the word Calvin Klein and the name Jungkook. Yet for those who knew him, who followed every step, they understood, behind that look, behind the denim, behind the lights, there was a story of return, of rediscovery, and of strength that spoke louder than any campaign ever could. Because this wasn't just another fashion shoot. It was a statement, a reminder that art can live in fabric, in movement, and in the quiet determination of a man who has never stopped evolving. And as the city lights faded behind him, Jungkook walked away from the set, hands tucked in his pockets, a small smile playing on his lips. The kind of smile that said the best stories are the ones we don't need to tell, because they live in the silence between the flashes.